What's up, Taiwan? I'm Eric Now with news from here in Taiwan and around the world. On China's National Day, Chinese President Xi Jinping had some words for Taiwan and what appears to be a warning for the international community. Cadence Caranta reports.
As China celebrates its National Day on the 76th anniversary of the founding of the People's Republic of China, Chinese President Xi Jinping addresses the nation, discussing the Chinese Communist Party's history and future plans, and, as usual, some firm words on Taiwan.
要深化两岸交流合作，坚决反对台独分裂行径和外部势力干涉，坚决捍卫国家主权和领土完整。
China claims Taiwan and has threatened to take it by force if necessary. Taiwan rejects those claims. In a statement, Taiwan's Mainland Affairs Council, which handles relations with China, reiterated that Taiwan's government will continue to defend its national sovereignty and the cross-strait status quo. Xi's warning on, quote, external interference comes at a time when China has stepped up efforts to isolate Taiwan diplomatically, repeatedly denouncing countries that allow Taiwanese officials to visit or have any contact with Taiwan's government. It also comes after a report that Xi is planning to push U.S. President Donald Trump to adopt a tougher stance on Taiwan as part of its trade deal with the U.S., prompting one State Department official to say the U.S. position on Taiwan has not changed. Some analysts say international concern is growing.
外部他们对于中国在整个台海这个单方面施加压力的做法顾虑越来越高，所以他们可能介入的用不同的方式介入程度会越来越高。反过来就是说，也会造成中国内部这种顾虑也会越来越多。
So as Xi marks a milestone for the people of China, he's also sending a clear message to the international community not to get involved in cross-strait affairs. Patrick Chen and Cadence Caranta for TaiwanPlus.
Here in Taipei, Tibetans and Hong Kongers are standing alongside Taiwanese lawmakers to protest China's National Day. They say they are giving a voice to the people among China's 1.4 billion population who are not celebrating the holiday, but who do not have the right to express their political opinions. Tiffany Wong has more.
抗中反压迫，抗中反压迫，人权不退让，人权不退让。
The leaders of overseas Hong Kong, Uyghur, and Tibetan human rights groups are calling attention to the plight of their communities on China's National Day, which is celebrated on October 1st. They say this is a painful day for minority communities in China, including Tibetans and Uyghurs, who face oppression of their cultures under the Chinese Communist Party.
西藏人可能不想笑也是应该要笑的。 那个是中共控制底下，不快乐也是让假装一个快乐。我们中共底下的苦难中的人已经来台湾，那我们在这边一起团结的这些活动，我们希望有一天会达到大家的目的。虽然知道每一个国家的情况不一样，西藏的情况不一样，台湾的情况不一样，我香港，我们大家的情况不一样，但是我们要面对是中共的。 所以今天我们在从民主国家上要让世界知道，中共说的跟做的完全不一样。
A Taiwanese democracy activist who had spent 5 years in Chinese jail for breaching national security laws says China's reach extends beyond its borders.
中国力量的崛起，伴随而来的是对世界输出威权统治的技术，强化独裁力量的稳固，以及对周边国家的武力威胁。 10月1号是中华人民共和国的国庆，但是对世界来说，这是人类和平的灾难，世界文明的耻辱。
China claims Taiwan as its own and has not ruled out the use of force to take it. During national holidays, Beijing often emphasizes its claims to Taiwan. And with frequent Chinese military activity near Taiwan's airspace and waters, there are people here calling out the threat that China poses to Taiwan's democratic systems and saying that they'll continue to stand with communities that face oppression. Klein Wong and Tiffany Wong in Taipei for TaiwanPlus.
Taiwan will not agree to a U.S. proposal to take over half of its chip production. That's according to Chief Trade Negotiator Zheng Lijun. That came after U.S. Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick said over the weekend that Washington wants to work out a 50-50 split in chip manufacturing. Zheng says this proposal did not come up during her most recent U.S. trip. She says those discussions focused instead on reducing the blanket 20% tariff on Taiwanese goods and getting better treatment for certain products.
我们取得在对等关税及232条款相关关税优惠待遇以及供应链合作上有完整的共识之后我们就会进入总结会议来达成台美的贸易协议。
Currently, Taiwan produces the vast majority of the world's most advanced chips. The U.S. will begin buying Taiwanese pineapples. That announcement came at a Taipei meeting between Taiwan President Lai Ching-te and U.S. Agriculture Undersecretary Luke Lindbergh.
Having discussed with my colleagues at the United States Department of Agriculture, we have decided to take the next step in allowing Taiwanese producers of pineapple access into the U.S. market.
Lindbergh's here in Taiwan, leading a delegation of 25 U.S. businesses to encourage agricultural trade. The two sides also signed a memorandum to increase American milk imports to Taiwan. The visit comes as Taiwan negotiates with the U.S. to lower import tariffs. At the memorandum signing, one Taiwan lawmaker used the opportunity to ask the U.S.'s de facto embassy here in Taiwan to advocate for a lower tariff rate.
拜托 AIT 跟川普总统讲，我们也希望低关税跟低关税让双方的人民都享受到最好的产品。
The U.S. currently levies a sweeping 20% tariff on most Taiwanese goods, and that's on top of existing duties. Taiwan was the world's top buyer of Russian naphtha in the first half of this year, according to a new report. Naphtha is a flammable fuel used to make plastics and some chemicals that are used for chip making. The report, released by environmental and civic groups, including the Center for Research on Energy and Clean Air, says Taiwan imported $1.3 billion worth of Russian naphtha in the first 6 months of 2025. Nearly all of that, 93%, went to Formosa Petrochemical Corporation. The study also says Russia's tax revenue from those sales could be enough to buy 170,000 drones like the ones being used in its invasion of Ukraine. Some lawmakers warn that relying on Russian fossil fuels could be dangerous for Taiwan.
大家可以知道呢，现在俄罗斯跟中国以往这个外热军人已经不存在了，他们军事的合作也越来越多。而当我们今天在能源的时候呢，既然如果还会再依赖俄罗斯的话，这个依赖性的问题会造成我们这个整个国家安全的危机。
Neither Taiwan's economy ministry nor Formosa Petrochemical responded to requests for comment. In September of 1945, Taiwan was witnessing the collapse of its former rulers, the Japanese Empire, and awaiting Republic of China rule. Allied POWs were being liberated across the island, and amid the turmoil, there was little time for anyone to confront the atrocities of the war. Bryn Thomas reports.
80 years ago, Allied prisoners of war were being liberated from across the collapsing Japanese Empire.
I was taken prisoner in Singapore, from where I was sent to Thailand and compelled to help build a railway, during which time at least 50% of the people that were sent there died of cholera, dysentery, diphtheria and malnutrition. From Thailand, I returned to Singapore and was embarked on board a Japanese ship which was to take us to Japan.
Throughout September of 1945, former Japanese colonial subjects in Taiwan worked to rescue and feed British and American air and seamen that had, until very recently, been their captives.
And now, I've come across Taiwanese in a way, and this is uncomfortable because where I have come across them was as guards on some of what became known as the hell ships. You know, that some of the American POWs were riding on to be sent to Japan.
Located at the geographic center of the Japanese Empire, Taiwan was an ideal transit point for POWs being shipped north to Japan's main island on squalid, airless, overheated ships.
My father came to Taiwan, which of course was Formosa then, and in one of the hell ships, and they held at the docks and kind of humiliated in front of the locals.
Ann Wheeler's father was one of the more than 1,000 POWs forced into slave labor in a mine in the mountains above Keelung, in what is now New Taipei. In total, about 4,000 captured soldiers and airmen were held in 14 camps across the island. The camps were overseen by the Japanese military, but some relied on locals for staffing. Discipline and orders ultimately flowed straight from Tokyo. Just months before the end of the war, 14 Allied airmen were executed here shot, or beheaded on the orders of Japanese authorities. And while they were guarded by Taiwanese prison guards, it was Japanese military police that were carrying out the killings. Today, this is all that's left of the walls of Taipei prison. Now, these walls were built from stones taken from Taipei's old city walls, laid by laborers who had little say as colonial subjects in the future of their city. Still, even under colonial rule, many of the 200,000 Taiwanese who served in the Japanese military volunteered when the call came from Tokyo. They were deployed alongside forced conscripts, taking on roles across Southeast Asia and China.
Before 1941, Japan was mostly focusing on the war in China. And some Taiwanese started to serve and to be recruited as interpreters in China for a good reason, because most Taiwanese were descendants of immigrants from southern China. So they shared common language and culture with people in China, especially in southern China.
And while most translation work was bureaucratic and innocuous, at times it served far darker purposes. Malaysian director Lau Kek Hua has spent years interviewing members of Southeast Asia's Chinese diaspora about the war.
Make use during the situation when they need translation. When you come to Mexico, you need to question people. You need to spot out who are the ones to be killed from the natives, who are the ones to be spared. All those kind of location, situation, Taiwanese soldiers would make use because of the language proficiency.
Between 1937 and 1945, up to 20 million civilians were killed under the Japanese Empire through massacres, forced labor, famine, and disease. In Southeast Asia, the death toll included up to 1 million in the Philippines, as many as 4 million in Indonesia, and up to 2 million in Vietnam, along with hundreds of thousands more in Burma, Malaysia, and Thailand.
The starved bodies of the liberated people bear witness to the sort of existence left to them by Japan's co-prosperity sphere.
Although Taiwanese were stationed across the empire, many were victims as well as perpetrators, forced into service, some as child soldiers.
Most Taiwanese are kind of stuck in a colonial system of bad choice A, worst choice B. You don't really have many choices. So I'm not sure it's necessarily Taiwanese not looking at their responsibility until recently. I think it's more an issue of the inability to kind of openly discuss those possibilities and to discuss the historical narrative, because that door wasn't open due to martial law.
80 years after the war's end, every Allied POW ever held in Taiwan is now dead, and the generation of Taiwanese that held them captive is fading fast. With first-hand witnesses disappearing, the task of reckoning with Taiwan's wartime past falls to historians, who try to make sense of choices made under extreme circumstances.
I think we need to look into wartime responsibility, not in the legal sense, not even in the political sense, but I think we need to look into wartime responsibility in terms of remembering. And by remembering what Taiwanese had experienced and done during the war, I think it will only help us to better understand the essence and the nature of war.
With Japan collapsing and Republic of China rule just weeks away, September 1945 began a period of rapid change for Taiwan. Peace had come to much of Asia, but its people still faced years of violence and political turmoil, leaving little room to confront wartime responsibility. 80 years later, Taiwan is still shaped by that turbulent past. Yisun Pan, John Su, Jeffrey Chen, and Bryn Thomas for TaiwanPlus.
And thank you for watching What's Up Taiwan. You can visit the TaiwanPlus website or follow our social media for more stories from Taiwan and around the world. Finally, take a look at Taipei Fashion Week, opening this month with the theme Fashion Action. I'm Eric Gao. Take care. We'll see you next time.